Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless Blades coming at you today with an epic battle in the $400 price range. The $400 Bushcraft blade battle. So here, the Benchmade 163 Bushcrafter. Here, the Olive Knives Arbor. For your $400, which one of these would you pick? Now, this is going to be a two-part series. And so today, we're going to do kind of the tabletop side of it. And then in the future, it is going to be the field version, putting these to hard use. Now again, both in the $400 range. The Benchmade 163 typically can be purchased for $400 at this point in time, whether you get it from Benchmade direct or whether you go to some other reseller at this point in time, $400. The Olive Knives Arbor, well, it's pretty much the same. It's $3.99. And again, whether or not you get it direct from Olive or you go to somebody else, and there are kind of not a ton of places where you can get this, but pretty much $3.99. That's what you're looking at. And both of these knives proclaiming to be in that bushcraft genre. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is presentation. Now, most people probably pretty familiar with Benchmade. You get that beautiful blue box. This is in their Blue Class. So as you take a look here, this is a Blue Class blade. Of course, Benchmade having a series of different classes. And you're getting your Benchmade Life Sharp service and warranty, which means that, if you need your knife sharpened or taken care of, certainly can. Now, as we open the box, general presentation, you can see inside the foam, the knife itself, and then your warranty, use, and care manual. Now, the first thing just to be careful of is with the limited lifetime warranty, Benchmade does warrant the original purchaser of the genuine Benchmade knife that is purchased at an authorized seller, which basically must be proven through a proof of purchase. And now we get to the knife. But before that, what about the presentation by Olive? And so Olive packaging, very nicely done. You can see a little more graphical in a way. Have these trees, and as we open up, this is the actual product box. So this is more like a shipping box. You can see their sort of motto here. And keep in mind the fact that Olive Knives are like an enthusiast company. They are around the overlanding industry. So they definitely have hard use mentality and kind of like the need to make it back home with the gear that you have. And right when we open up, this kind of speaks to that. So you get these nice large vehicle stickers, which are kind of in that like overland style. If you look at a lot of branding that kind of comes from that genre, this definitely ties right in. Now, beyond the vehicle decals, a couple of other nice stickers. So it comes with some basic stickers. But what's really cool is not only do you get a full color user's manual with just super high quality photography, extremely nicely made, just beautiful presentation. It really does describe exactly what you're buying with the Arbor because it is a unique grind. The Fibonacci grind we're going to see in a little bit, very unique, and this describes it pretty much perfectly. But you also get some cool camping recipes. So if you like outdoor cooking and wanted to put your knife to some good quality use, not only do you get the basics with the knife, but you get this cool little camping recipe. And the presentation just really does show. And not only that, but just right away, just the beauty in the knife. Now, very similar, Olive Knives does have a lifetime warranty, but it is somewhat limited just from the standpoint that it's not quite the no questions asked guarantee. Don't use the knife as a pry bar, but if there are any workmanship or craftsmanship errors or manufacturer's problems to contend with, Olive will warranty the knife. And so now, picking up on the two knives, you can see these both fall in the exact same blade size class. In fact, from specifications, they're actually very similar, which makes these a fantastic comparison. So not only are we both in exactly that $400 mark, but we have very similar properties. So this is a fantastic apples to apples comparison. Now, where some things are going to differ. The Benchmade, USA made entirely. So a USA made blade. Also, basically call it all USA sourced materials. In the case of the Olive, it is a mix between USA made, South African made, and then European materials. So it's not 100% USA made. And so therefore, doing their work in the United States, they are just sourcing materials currently from overseas, partly because of availability of materials, partly because of price, and partly because of their origins. So all in all, I mean, if you want a purely USA made blade, you're talking about the Benchmade. But if you don't mind having some European and South African influence, and then also, partially USA made, you're going to potentially look at the Olive. So that's the first thing. Now, getting into the knives themselves, we'll talk about the sheaths later. The knives, again, both being considered in that Bushcraft class and both having a drop point design. Now, right away, you can see that the Bushcrafter having the unsharpened swedge, a little more clipped. You can see the stonewash finish right there. S30V, which is a fantastic steel. So the S30V here, this is going to have a heat treatment 58 to 60 HRC. And when you look at the stock thickness here, you're talking about 0.164 inches, or in other words, 4.17 millimeters. With the Olive Knives Arbor, this is Elmax steel, and you can see actually it's labeled right on the top of the spine there, Elmax. Elmax is from Bowler. So Bowler, a very reputable steel company, doing a very nice job with their steel. Again, you can see that this is, kind of tumbled, has that stonewash looking finish. More of a traditional drop point design, but the interesting thing, as you take a look at both of these, the grind geometry, very, very much different. Now going back to the Benchmade, you can see this is a 2/3 height saber grind. So you end up with that nice thick flat stock on top, full thickness, all the way down to the transition where you get into your primary grind about 2/3 of the way up the blade, and then all the way down to that secondary bevel. Benchmade, typically very sharp right outside the box, and absolutely here, this is no exception. Nice grind, pretty even from the tip all the way down to that generous sharpening choil. But the Olive Knives Arbor, very much different. Now you can see that as the light transitions, this is that Fibonacci grind. And it's really like a multi-stage convex where it ends up that full stock thickness, again about 2/3, maybe a little more height. That's probably reaching between 2/3 and 3/4 height. But then you get into those transitions, which is pretty much, in essence, if you were to look down the blade, like a convex edge, really a full convex blade down into that secondary bevel. Only it's done with a step machine process, and that, again, is what is patented and coined as the Fibonacci grind. And as we line both of these up, as I've been saying all along, very similar in overall size. However, as we go through it here, the Benchmade, the overall length, 9.04 inches. That's the total length. The blade length, 4.38 inches. Once we rotate the knife, you have a thickness, the maximum thickness, 0.948 inches thick on the handle. Again, we mentioned that this is the S30V, 58 to 60 HRC, 0.164 inches or 4.17 millimeters thick. For the Arbor, total length here, 9.27 inches. Blade length, 4.54 inches. As we pick up the knife here, maximum thickness through the palm swell, 0.847 inches. You can see there just a nice quality, really rounded out and smoothed out palm swell. And then again, the Elmax steel, the 0.177 inches, 4.5 millimeters, the Elmax 6261.5 HRC. And really, from here on out, I would go as far as to say 2 completely different knives. Now, I'm going to get past sort of fact and get into opinion. And in my opinion, 2 drastically different knives. And I automatically, naturally gravitate towards one way more than the other. And I'm talking by leaps and bounds. Now, it's not to say that one is better than the other, depending on your needs or depending on what you like. But for me, I'm just going to come out and say it. The Benchmade leaves a lot to be desired. And I mean a lot. The angles, the square nature, some of the hot spots that are in this design, and the overall package really do not do it justice. And I'm going to say by itself, but especially when you compare it side by side with the Arbor literally blows the Benchmade clear out of the water for a number of reasons. And I will explain, in my opinion, why. Now, in order to go through this, we're going to have to talk about the handle first and foremost. I already started to talk about the blocky nature, but there are also some weird transitions. Now, I do understand why this was thinned out towards the back end, and that is pretty much so that when you index on the knife, you kind of squeeze down a little bit with more of your ring finger and pinky finger and start to close the grip, and that leaves a natural little ramp here for your middle finger and everything kind of indexing. That's okay. I don't mind it. It does work, and I'm going to say it definitely does work. The handle feels okay, but right away, and what catches me right away is right here. Notice when you grip the knife, you do tend to come up on the guard just a bit. There's almost no way to avoid that. I mean, you don't really carve with a knife far back in your hand. You grip it up, and, you know, whether you go full hammer grip or get your thumb over the top, right here, this is a very sharp transition. This hook, the way that's machined, the way it is angled, and you can even see the way that the light catches and casts a hard shadow. That is a straight, that's a hard edge. And that's going to definitely wear on your hand over time and potentially leave some real serious hot spots if you're not careful. Whereas the Arbor, well, the Arbor takes care of all of that, where the G10 is perfectly rounded and sculpted in every single way, shape, and form. As you grip the knife, it already feels good in the hand. It's nice and rounded out. And you'll notice that even the Arbor, it necks down through this area. It's not like there's, you know, a real thick, fat handle in the back. It's nice and accommodating, exactly the same as the Benchmade, only they did it without sharp transitions. And let's go back to the name of this knife, Bushcrafter. Literally, Bushcrafter. And you're telling me that a knife coined as Bushcrafter is going to have hot spots and hard transitions? I'm sorry, but that makes zero sense to me. I don't quite understand it. And just look how blocky and square this entire thing is. Not to mention, well, here's the next piece. This is a nice, kind of view where you can see not only do you have the tang of the knife, but you have those red liners inside the green G10. Well, this is going to be a little hard for you to see, but if you rotate the knife, the tang is still kind of gleaming there. If it's catching the light enough, you're seeing it popping out beyond those red liners. Well, that's just, and I'm not going to say it's poor fitment because that was done by design, but it's just a little bit sharp and a little bit square. But if you look what Olive does, they account for that and they do it purposely. But, well, it's all crowned and crowned beautifully, wonderfully rounded over, and extremely soft and comfortable to the touch. And so there are absolutely no hot spots. It is fully rounded out so that it's comfortable. And even more so, take a look at where my thumb indexes. Right on top of the blade, yeah, that right there, that spine, 90 degrees, sharpened to scrape and rip on a ferro rod. But not where my thumb is. That's also perfectly crowned. So that's comfortable. It's not going to beat you up. No potential for damage. And when it comes down to the Benchmade, well, that's not exactly a 90-degree spine. I bet you that would throw sparks, but it's not going to rip on a ferro rod like the Olive. And it's pretty much exactly the same through the entire spine. So that means you're on a semi kind of rounded-ish, squarish spine with your thumb. It's just not a complete thought. And again, this is a bushcraft knife by name. It should have bushcraft features by design. And that's where, again, the Olive just really does take over. Now, you'll notice both of these with the oversized fluted pins. That's good quality, heavy-duty, robust construction in both cases. This is kind of a Shane Seibert-esque, I would say, trademark look, which, does come on a lot of different models. Of course, here on the Benchmade and other of his personal designs, you can see here that these are nicely done, and they're kind of like a 45-degree wedge as these pins were fluted out. And then you have some machined G10, which really does finish off the look. Now, similarly, only a little bit nicer, actually a lot of bit nicer, Olive, similar, bigger tubes, but they are fully rounded over, and everything just has that nice, soft, and rounded look. And just the way it catches the light, very nicely done. Now, it's not a huge deal. Both of them are, equally strong, very nice in terms of the construction methodology. I would just say that the Arbor took it a little further. Now, I do a lot of stabbing. I need to get down and through my wood, put my thumb over the top, stab down, twist and crack, create kindling, split it down into little tinder. And you'll notice as a reverse grip, there is not a ton in the way of a guard, a little bit, but not a ton. So what this means is it really does require you to fully grip the knife, get your thumb over the top, and index right there for positive lockup. Now that's a long handle, not a bad thing for big paws. However, it does make it just a little bit of a stretch to get over the top. And with this hard angle, you can see, even though that's kind of rounded over, and not too bad, but it really is difficult to get that positive lockup. Now, I'm going to go back to the Arbor, which also has a fairly large handle. However, the way the geometry is, when you rotate the knife around, not only do you get a very pronounced guard, and that guard is fully enveloped G10 around the tang of the knife, so the steel protects, protected from that G10, so it's not going to totally crush your pinky. But that stretch is not nearly as long, and it is a large stretch, but because this is fully rounded over here, no hot spots, no sharp spots, and even the fact that the steel is perfectly crowned, that just works fantastic. So in my opinion, also a better design, especially in a bushcraft knife where you may need to do some stabbing. And next, the lanyard tube. Well, this is awesome. A bushcraft knife should have a lanyard tube. I agree. And that's great that that's in there. But a couple of things. In my opinion, lanyard tubes on top are not as advantageous as lanyard tubes on the bottom. I see why they did that because of the space and availability, and it gets a little peaky down here. But the other thing is, you'll notice that the tube goes from one side of the G10 all the way to the other, and that's fine, but that means that your lanyard will now come outside the scales and then loop around the back. And again, that's fine, but that's more sort of hot spot that's going to rub into your palm. And again, not a huge deal, but it's just that the Arbor does it better and a lot better. Notice that that hole is fully recessed. So when you put your lanyard in the hole, well, it comes out the backside of the G10 and it never protrudes thicker than the handle thickness. And so that means when you're using the knife, what's touching your hand is the softened out G10, not even the lanyard at all. It completely bypasses your hand because it's coming through that little port in the back and it's making it out the backside. So you're not burning on your hands, you're not creating hot spots. It's just the Arbor does it all better. Better design, better thought process, better geometry. And it doesn't just stop there. So the Benchmade here is the Sheath, a reasonable leather sheath, wet formed, has a ferro rod holder. That's cool, works out well. Belt loop, that's very simple. Feels to be okay. It is kind of snug right out of the gate, which is a good thing. So that means that the knife will positively lock into the sheath. But where it falls apart for me, I do like that it has the loop, but I hate straps. This strap, I just simply hate it for a couple of reasons, but most specifically because now, in order for me to get the knife out of the sheath, I either need to risk cutting through the strap, which definitely does happen, or I need to then hold the strap out of the way with fingers, which are then in proximity of blades. And especially when I'm in the woods doing my bushcraft stuff for hiking, camping, backpacking, you name it, I really don't want to put my fingers in the way. I really just don't want to do it. And to me, if we look at the Arbor, well, they're also producing leather, but their leather is so wet formed and deep ride, so you'll see how far that goes in. It actually indexes inside the fluted pin, and it has like a Kydex-like click. So beautifully made, incredibly nice, stiff, rugged. This is like flimsy, and I don't know. I guess I will say cheap feeling, a little bit cheap feeling. This definitely feels premium. Now, the edges here on the Benchmade, you can see how it's welted. Little drain hole here, and it's okay. The Arbor, it's literally finished like Kydex. It's beautiful. It's just incredibly well made, and it's just secure. And when you go to set the knife in the leather sheath, it actually clicks. Listen to that. It clicks like Kydex. It won't come out. To me, it is so superior of a design, and that's the leather. Never mind if you want the Kydex, which is about as nice a Kydex as you can get with a production knife. Awesome rivets, industry standard spacing, beautiful form, just extremely well done. The drain hole on the end, nice simple, nylon backer that's adjustable in height. This is flexible and can, rotate around and kind of move with you a little bit. And then you have the adjustability in terms of the retention. The retention is on top, which is very cool, and you can use it like a ramp to push off. So their sheath systems are just, in my opinion, leaps and bounds beyond the Benchmade just anyway. And so I know what we've been talking about today is mostly look and feel and I guess personal preference. And the reality is, when it all boils down to it, well, performance will prevail. And so, moving forward, I'm going to have to test these knives. And so the follow-up to this will be field use. The field use will make the final determination. Am I being hypercritical of the Benchmade? Am I overthinking it? All I'm doing is pointing out that we have two $400 production knives. This is $800 in knives right here. Two $400 production knives, both of which that proclaim to be in that bushcraft genre. And the one that always gets the praise, the one that everybody gave, I want to say they have like a 4.8 star rating for this knife on their website. 4.8 stars means it should be almost perfect. But in my opinion, this holds nothing to the Olive Knives. Look, check this out. Look at this. Look at the grind lines and like chatter on the secondary bevel here on the Benchmade. It's just like grind lines. It's normal to see that. But look at the Olive. It's like a polished edge. They got it like almost mirrored. I mean, you really can't even compare these two blades and take it seriously. But, for $400, you should understand what you're getting, and you should understand what your other options are. And in my opinion, would you go with the Benchmade if you knew you could get this Olive Knives? The Arbor? I would go with the Arbor every time. So if you're stumbling across this video and you want to see more, keep an eye out for my field use footage. But until then, thanks for watching. Take care now. I'll see you soon.